This week what we're going to go over is the critical path method, which is a way to look at projects, see what needs to be done, see what's the most crucial things to get done. It actually allows us to time how long it will take us to complete the project. And so that's what we're going for. And so I've already put this into Excel, so you can hit pause and throw it into yours. We've got these different activities in this project, A through H. Each one, it shows us how long it's going to take. Here's the time. And here's the predecessors. For example, we can't do B or C until A is done. We go down to E, both C and D have to be done. So we're just going to draw out this picture. And what I recommend typically to do first is perhaps do it on a piece of scratch paper. And so you can double check and you try to draw them in a way that it looks clean still. You might have to move some activities around till you get it, but it will always work. So I'm just going to start here and go. Let's merge and center. We'll talk about this thing here in a bit. So when we draw the project, first thing we want to do, we always start with A, or the first thing we do. Let's make a border around that. And then up here, let's copy and paste this. Okay, so we know that both B and C have to have A done first. So that will be my B, and this will be my C. All right, and then we go to D. D has to have B done first. We're going to put it up here. We'll draw the arrows here in a second to put this all together. Call that D. E has to have both C and D, and I don't want to put that here because then I'd have a line coming straight down. I actually want to put it here, and you'll see why here in a sec. That is my E. F has to have D done first. G has to have F. And H has to have both G and E, so we'll put that back in the middle. Call that H. All right, so that's them kind of in order, but we always want to tie it together with arrows so we can see how the project will flow. The way you do that in Excel, you go Insert, and yours is going to have something like this somewhere, Illustrations. Click down and you're going to have the Shapes icon. I'm going to grab the shape and I'm going to say, okay, so since B is a predecessor for A has to be done before B, so that's how the project is going to flow. Control C, VVV, I grabbed that, copied a bunch of them. Then I'm going to do the same thing that C, the predecessor is A, so that it's got to flow from A to C. I'm going to hit pause here and finish out this project, and then we'll talk about it. All right, class, back with you. So I have now drawn the project with all of those arrows and shapes. Let's just talk about it. You always want to double check your work. So we saw already that both B and C had a predecessor of A. D, I go through every one to double check it. D is C. E is both D and C, and you can see the arrow flowing up to E both ways. F is D, we're good. G is F, and then H is E and G, or G and E. And so we are correct, we're good. We have every arrow in place and they're all correct. You always want to double check that when you're all done to make sure you did it correctly. All right, so now let's get rid of these grid lines so we can work a little bit more here and be a little cleaner. We've got to figure out the earliest start, the earliest finish, the late start, and the late finish for every activity. And I'm going to show you how to do that. This is a little tricky. There is software that does this automatically. QM is an example. There's others. But this is the way we understand what's going on. And so we're just going to go through it. So we'll start here. The earliest start is what we're thinking about to begin with when we're going across the top. And the way you want to do this, you want to do all the top numbers first and then move to the bottom and do the bottom numbers. So the earliest we can start our activity is time period 0. I'm going to make this all center aligned. So it's on. Okay, there we go. All right, so that's activity A. The earliest we can start is 0. Now, the earliest we can finish is going to equal 0 plus how long it takes for activity A, which is 1, whatever the time period is here. All right, so by the same token, remember these are both, A is a predecessor for both B and C. So the earliest we can start B is going to equal, once we're done with A in time period 1, or after time period 1. Same with C, so it's going to equal the 1. All right, now B, the earliest we can finish, it's going to equal this plus the time for B, and the exact same for C, equals how long it takes for C. All right, D, we're just moving along now. Earliest we can start is after 5, and then equals the 5 plus how long it takes for D. F, it's going to equal, and then equals this plus how long it takes for F. All right, first tricky one, E. We know that E has a predecessor of what? Both C and D. So in other words, they both have to be done. Now I would tell you just to grab the bigger one, but the problem with that is projects always change with time. And so you might have to go back in and change some of your numbers as it goes along, and will change your finish time, things like that. So the correct way to do this is going to equal the function max, M-A-X, and then you hit the 7, the comma, and the 4. What that will do is that function will pull the bigger number of the two, meaning we can't start until both of them are done. All right, so the same thing here for E is going to equal this plus how long it takes for E. Good. Up here equals our 9. And you don't want to type numbers in ever on this one. You always want to do equal in the cell reference. Plus G. All right, and then here once again we've got 2 coming in for H. You've got both G and E, so it's going to equal max. And that's going to be of the both being done on the earliest they can be done before you can start here. So now this is going to equal this plus how long it takes for H. So good news, we just figured out, if we were talking about weeks here, this is going to take 15 weeks to complete. That's the earliest we can finish the project, but we want to know a lot more. So when we went from left to right, we used the adding and we used the max when there was 2 arrows coming into it. When we go back across the bottom, it's a little bit trickier. You've got to subtract the amount of the time for each project. And then if you have 2 arrows coming into it, you've just got to turn your brain around to think exact opposite. So for example, here, I've got 2 arrows that come in flow this way, and so I need to do the minimum of those 2 numbers. And the exact same thing right here. Since there's 2 arrows coming into this activity, you want to do the minimum. Now when you're working back across the bottom, don't even think about the numbers on the top. Just think they're disappearing. In fact, I've had some students who have actually come in and made them some weird color, so they couldn't even see them. So they knew just to work on the bottom and not touch these ones on the top. So all you do, the only thing you need from the top when you're working along the bottom is going to equal, and you bring the 15 down. And then as I said, we work exactly opposite, so it's going to equal the 15 minus how long it takes for H. So now that's the latest finish and the latest start we can have to get this project done in 15 weeks. Now we're bringing them over. Minus G. Minus F. It's going to equal, we pull it up here. So I see the tendency sometimes for someone to grab one of these top numbers here. Remember, exact opposite, you only touch the bottom numbers. So the 12 equals the 12 minus E. Okay, so we've got the 2 arrows here, so remember, and it could be 3 arrows as well. Let's say that there was another activity this was going to, then you could have a minimum of 3 different numbers. In this example, we only have 2. So min of the 8, comma, and the 7 equals this minus D. Minus C. Getting close. The 5 minus for B. And then once again a min right here equals min. This, comma, this on the bottom. And then equals this minus A. All right, so this takes a second to think about, but what have we done here? So remember, we have the early start, the early finish, the late start, and the late finish. So that's when these things need to happen in order to get this project done in 15 weeks. And so what you're noticing now is that some of our activities have the same earliest start and the latest start, as well as the earliest finish and the latest finish. So you can see A, B, D, E, and H all have the same numbers on the top and bottom, where activity C, for example, does not. So the earliest start and the latest start has a difference of 3 weeks, and the same here, the 4 and the 7. I come over here, you've got F. There's a difference between the 7 and the 8 of 1 week. Same with the 9 and the 10. We call that slack. So activity F has 1 week of slack, meaning if this activity falls behind 1 week, we'll still get the project done in 15 weeks. So if activity C, it can fall behind all the way up to 3 weeks, and we're still going to get the activity or the project done in 15 weeks. However, if one of these fall behind, B, D, E, A, or H, every week any of these projects falls behind, it's going to change our final project timeline. And let me just show you that, then I'll move it back. So let's say that B goes from 4 weeks to 5 weeks. And while I do this, watch this back number. Switches to 5, we go up to 16 weeks. I move it back to 4. All right, activity C, I could move that all the way up to, it's at 3 now. If I move it up to 6, the project is still going to be done in 15 weeks because there's that much slack in that activity. And so let's assume I asked you a couple different questions. Let's say that first was, how long will it take this activity to be completed, or this project, it's a better word. A, this will take 15 weeks. Okay, B, what is the critical path? And you always want to draw the critical path, and the critical path is those activities that have to be done on time with no slack, or else the whole project falls behind. The way I do that, I hit all the arrows in between the activities that are on the critical path. I'm holding control, control, control. I'm going to go to format, and I'm going to make those orange rather than red. It shows the activities on the critical path. But the way you would answer that, if I asked what activities are on the critical path, you would say A, B, D, E, and H. So those are our activities that if we're managing this project, we don't want to burn a relationship right here if it falls a week behind, if we need that same person to help us here. Because that's where, if this one falls a week behind, we need to get it on as quick as possible because it's affecting our end date. This one would not if it's a week behind. So that's why it's so crucial to understand the critical path. So A, B, D, E, H. Now it is possible and you can have 2 critical paths, or even the whole project could be critical path. I'll go and show you that. So if C was 6 weeks, as I said before, this is now on the critical path. So I would also add C to that list, and I would make these 2 arrows orange as well. And so it would just be A, B, C, D, E, H are the activities on the critical path. So let's go back to the 3 there. All right, so what else could I ask you? Take 15 weeks. Let's say that C, if I asked you a question like, for example, how much slack is in activity F? There is 1 week of slack in activity F. Okay, how much slack is in activity, and the way I did that, once again, the difference between the 8 and the 7. So how much slack is in activity C? It was 3 weeks. If I asked you how much slack was in activity B, you would say no slack because it's on critical path. Something I would probably ask you on an assignment or exam is if you had the option to take 1 week away from either activity C or D, which one would you choose and why? All right, so the correct answer there would be I would take 1 week away from activity D, because that will change our project completion date from 15 weeks down to 14 weeks. All right, and so you can always look back at this. I would probably write this little thing down somewhere for your notes. They will get a little more complicated on the assignment and test, but it's the exact same steps that we went over here, and you just need to make sure to take this one step at a time to drive it to the finish line. So till next week, have a great day.